So what is social media? Well, social media is in the form of a digital media, which is online. It could be in the form of, say, Facebook type social media where people are sharing articles, people are commenting on them. It could be completely separate to traditional media, or it could be an expansion of traditional media, putting up news stories and then having commentary underneath from their users underneath. So it could be an expansion, but it's not traditional media in the sense of newspapers, TVs, and what have you. There's just some examples of traditional media, some of the logos you might see in different variations. And obviously, we've got Facebook, we've got X, which used to be called Twitter, we've got Messenger, we've got WhatsApp, and so on and so on, Instagram, and so on. And you might not even think of YouTube as being social media, but it's social media with videos. And again, people are commenting and sharing, and so it is very much a form of social media. Some little stats on social media. This can be updated if you follow that website at the bottom. So this is from the latest at this particular time of creating the video from Feb 2025. So throughout the world, there are 5.24 billion people using social media, which when you consider how many people there are in the world, is a huge percentage of people using social media. Okay. So quarter on quarter, it's still, even now, after all these years, it's still increasing. Even though it might be quite a small increase currently of only 0.5%, it is still increasing. There are still people taking out social media accounts for the very first time who've never used any form of social media. And again, year on year change, if you multiply that over the year, from this time last year, 4% more people are still using this. So the quarter might be quite low, but over year upon year, it's still increasing. At one point, it was increasing as much as 10-20% a year. An average use people spend on social media over 2 hours and 21 minutes, which is quite huge when you think about it. But I have many students who tell me, oh, that's nothing. I spend hours more on social media than that. Average number of social media platforms used. Well, this always shocks people. They estimate between 6 or 7 different types of social media. So we all use maybe WhatsApp, we all use maybe Facebook, we all use maybe YouTube, but people often use as many as 3 or 4 more than that. Let's look at some of the information about the types of users. So population-wise, 63.9% of total population use social media. So more people than not use social media. Okay, this is on adults. So of adults, 86.6%. This is in February, remember? So of all adults, 86% of all adults in the world are using social media. In fact, social media using the internet worldwide is 94.2%, which is absolutely crazy when you think about it. Of which, for females, 45.4% of females, and males is higher, 54.6%. Males has consistently been higher, which I always feel it will be the other way around, but apparently that's the way. So there's some stats on social media. And now let's look at some online safety tips. So simple objective. So understand safe online safety methods. Learn how to identify secure websites and deals. Explore how to use credit cards for protection. Credit cards are very much safer to use for online shopping, which we'll cover. And recognize fraudulent websites. Discover also the tools that fraudsters use and how to protect yourself using, simple techniques. So let's look at what a fake website is, for example. And unfortunately, this is one of the growing areas fraudsters are using, where they're even able to inject their site into legitimate sites such as Google, and you may be searching for an item, and particularly when you're searching for an item by a model or by name, and you might be taken to one particular site which is extremely cheap in comparison to all the other sites, particularly all the other well-known sites such as Amazon and such like. and these can be fake websites. And one way of finding fake websites is always look for sites which are secure, which means they have HTTPS as the start of their email, their website address, their URL as it's called. Make sure it's HTTPS. And also, make sure that you're not unfortunately giving your information to a scammer. You're not in the process of trying to buy a cheap item, giving your credit card, your name and address to a scammer who can then use that information to make fraudulent purchases in your name. You have to be so very careful. And use credit card as a means of protection. Make sure that you use your credit card. Your credit card company gives you an enormous amount of protection, whereas if you're using other alternatives such as PayPal and even debit cards don't give you anywhere near as much protection when you're shopping online. Now, some simple ways of protecting yourself. So we've already mentioned about the HTTPS. So you can see here, HTTPS:/. This is the beginning of the URL for a shop. And see that you either have maybe in your particular browser, you may have a padlock symbol. It may come up with different colors at the top. It might come up with the word secure, as you see here. But some way there will be a method to say that that particular website is a secure website. It's what we call a secure socket layer. The secure socket layer basically says this is a website which has been created by an organization which can prove they are who they say they are. They can prove their identity. And they have to not only pay to have that, but they also have to, to verify their true identity. Very difficult, if not impossible, for a fraudster to actually, have a secure site such as that. So if you see HTTPS at the beginning of a site web address, then you can be practically 100% secure and confident in that particular site. It could be a phishing attempt. It could be a fake website that looks similar to another website. And for example, you can actually find examples online of websites that look exactly the same as Amazon. They look exactly the same as eBay, and they will try and use names which are very similar in their domains. And very often these get shut down very quickly because both legal and sort of the original, they're copied websites. So Amazon's quite proactive, for example, cutting in having closed anyone looks like them and is pretending to be them. So that sort of organization. And again, we've talked already about using two-factor authentication, using that extra layer of security. So not only does the person maybe put in their username and the password, or maybe if they've got access to a person's personal device, that might be secured in their actual, on their web browser, on a stolen laptop, for example. It's not unusual for, fraudsters to have stolen laptops and see if they've got access to individual accounts via the saved username and password on that particular device. But it then asks on a separate device, maybe a smartphone, for the user to verify that they are the person currently trying to log in to that particular account, obviously at which point they will be alerted to the issue. So understanding these terms is important because you need to know, is it a secure website? Is it HTTPS or do they use secure socket layers? Is it a phishing scam? Is there somebody trying to pretend to be somebody else, like your bank or a well-known retailer online? And are you using the as much security, such as two-factor authentication, to prove that when you go to a website, you can be reasonably confident that that site is secure against anyone else hacking in apart from you, using it as per what you prefer. So secure websites, as I said, already use this HTTPS security. There will be a padlock, there will be trusted seal of some sort, there'll be some sort of indication on your web browser it's a genuine site, and none of that can be faked. So that can't be, created by a hacker to give you the impression it's a secure site when it isn't. It's totally secure. And identify, when you identify good deals, it's so often easily to to jump at what looks like a really cheap or discounted code type offer, only to realize during the process you've actually come to a website which is not. It may look like, a recognized site. So it may look like the style of a recognized site, such as you've used before, like Amazon and eBay and so on, but it may not actually be a site you've used before. Therefore, you have to be more reluctant to give that trust to a new site. Okay. So, if possible, rely on established outlets. There are plenty of established outlets, plenty of online sites which you may or may not have used yourself, but you may get recommendations from others. And many of these are coming along, particularly from areas such as China, which people may have horror stories, or people might be very happy, and you can decide yourself if you want to trust or start using that site yourself. You can check comparison sites such as Google Shopping, which generally takes you only to legitimate sites. Google have been caught out in the past, but they're very quick to respond as soon as they're aware that one of the sites using their Google Shopping comparison service is fake. They very quickly disallow that site from access, even while they're investigating, very quickly, to protect all the users. Be aware of anything really, really unusually cheap. So if you're looking for something in particular and then you get prices coming up maybe on Google sites or somewhere else which looks unusually cheap, be suspicious. That may not be a genuine website. It might just be a phishing attempt. And is it secure? Again, going back again to the basics. Does it use a secure socket layer? Is it got a HTTPS? Is it a secure site? So some examples, so as I've spoken about already, Amazon, for example, I think we can guarantee that's going to be a pretty secure site, provided it is properly Amazon. If it's a misspelling or somebody faking an Amazon website, then you have to be very secure, very conscious of that. eBay, again, provided it's proper eBay and, you've logged onto it before and it comes up with your details and it logs you on and things like that, you'd be absolutely reasonably happy to accept a level of security. And as I've said already, Google Shopping is a good comparison, a good place to find, good secure sites which are cheaper. Even small difference in price, it will rank them in order of the cheapest. There are many others. There's many high street stores which also have an online presence, and they are again normally quite quite secure, quite genuine. Again, always be very secure, conscious of fake sites coming up, which could look like the real site but isn't. And then we have a whole variety of news sites, which some people have heard horror stories, some have had really good experiences from. These are the sites you need to be careful of. So these are the sites. For example, I've used Temu for a period of time now, and I've been very happy with this. I've used AliExpress, been reasonably happy. Returns are not as easy. I've never used these sites, but other people I know have, and they're reasonably happy with them. So it's you have to base it on the fact that for example, I wouldn't have dreamed of using Temu for large purchases originally, but over time, as you gain confidence in the retailer, you can determine how much trust you want to give that particular retailer. And most definitely, these sort of retailers, particularly these Chinese retailers and others, many, many others, are very much undercutting on price. They can very much be more competitive than normal online retailers as we've had in the past. But when purchasing, always consider paying by credit card, particularly when you're purchasing with a new retailer for the first time. Even if that incurs some sort of small cost, because unfortunately retailers also have to pay these additional costs for credit cards more so than debit cards and what have you. And the large reason for that is because credit cards protect both the user and retailers themselves. Because obviously if items don't arrive, they can claim against the credit card just as much as you can claim against credit card if that's a fake site. So a credit card is a particularly good idea with new site purchases, with new sites you've never used before. So fraud protection. So again, recapping on using credit cards. So this is always the benefit to using credit cards. You can dispute transactions. It's very easy indeed to dispute transactions. Not that you're not going to have to maybe put up a fight, but generally, and the law recently has changed on this, where credit cards will normally have to refund you that amount of money. There are a small number of exceptions. For example, when you book flights and various holiday type package deals, they may not have to. They may be able to investigate still, but generally they have to refund you, and then they have to take the effort to prove if that is a genuine or that was a fake site or what have you. And under very rare circumstances now, can they reclaim that money back from you? They give you purchase protection, so even if the retailer goes out of business and the item goes faulty, you can still get protection, and very much an easier refund, even easier than debit cards. Debit cards very much more difficult than using a credit card. So always recommend using credit cards if possible. Okay, that was a little activity we did in the class, so I'll leave that for you to think about. So spotting fake sites. So check for spelling errors. So you'd be surprised how sometimes fraudsters, they're not really in that particular language you're using. So you often get fraudsters who create variations of fake sites in a number of different languages. And of course, they may not be fluent, so they're using simple translation to transfer the content from one language to another. So there could be, simple spelling mistakes or grammatical errors, which can be an indication that site is not a genuine site. Avoid sites with unusual domain names is one of the often. So avoid sites which have a name you've never used, but also a site which has a unusual name, a name which you've never sort of come across, especially a site which has a name which doesn't look like a normal commerce site. It might look like it's hosted on, say, a Google site or a Wiz, website domain created by a third party. Be aware of unsolicited emails as well. If you get emails which talk about, amazing prices, then it's not always a good thing to click on those links. Never mind look at that content. Yeah. Use trusted payment methods. Going back to, we talked about credit cards, but even if you can't use credit cards on that site, and that might be legitimate reasons, there are more charges for the retailer in using credit cards than there are using other payment methods, such as, for example, Google Wallet or, PayPal. Google Wallet, is simply a third party. It doesn't give you any additional protection above using your, bank card directly. So you have to be very careful. Likewise with PayPal. Avoid sharing personal information, obviously goes without saying, and keep your antivirus software up to date, because a lot of these sort of sites aren't really even intending to sell. They're trying to get something on your computer, maybe spyware or viruses. They might ask you to download something like what looks like an invoice, but it isn't actually active content. So you have to be very careful and very conscious of this at all times, unfortunately, which makes life a bit more stressful, a bit more worrying when shopping online. So going back to the basics again, so antivirus, we've discussed it previously, it's not really antivirus, it's more so anti-malware, anti-spyware software these days, and keeping your browsers up to date and these sorts of, using browser extensions. There's quite a large number of browser extensions, but still always keeping in mind the basics. Is it a secure site and so on. And now for the final slide, just a quick review. So to be safe online, think of, the different sort of ways of shopping. So for example, we are now within the session, we are going to look at different sites. We're going to maybe have recommendations from individuals. We're going to be able to share good practice. Identifying those secure websites. Look for that HTTPS. Make sure it's got a secure socket layer, a certificate with that particular website. Use your credit card as well for protection. And avoiding fraud and fake sites. Look for sites which you know and trust. Don't be sort of forced and compelled to use sites you have no understanding of who they really are. And even if they are a proper trader, they might be completely fake, trying to get your personal information, which they may be using for their own, bad reasons, but also might be even selling to third parties to use in bad ways. And you can use tools to protect yourself online as well. You can be using, for example, keep your computers up to date, keep your, antivirus up to date, keep your browsers up to date, because a lot of these browsers also have a list of known bad sites which pretend to be other sites and so on. So by using an updated web browser alone, it might come up with an error message saying this site is, known to be, a scam site and what have you. Discuss any remaining questions, obviously in session, and at this point we then moved on. We started looking at sort of online purchases. So hopefully you enjoy that and have a good list of highly recommended and safe places you can buy online.